Welcome to My God, a series exploring the spirituality of New Zealanders. Each week, we'll meet someone who takes their religion seriously, and we'll talk to them about their life, their work, their family, and of course, their God. Our first program focuses on Islam. The first Muslims to come to New Zealand were Chinese, part of the gold rush of the 1880s. Today, there are over 40,000 New Zealand Muslims, and that number's growing fast. Anjum Rahman is one of them. She's making a name for herself as a community leader and as a candidate on the Labour list. Anjum's lived in Hamilton for 35 years now. She arrived as a 5-year-old. Her Indian father had been studying in Canada when the prospect of a job drew him to New Zealand. It was a culture shock for her parents, but an even bigger one for their shy little daughter. So you were a little Indian Canadian Muslim girl in Hamilton?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Actually, growing up in Hamilton was quite difficult. I found it really hard because there weren't any other Muslim children that I was aware of in Hamilton at that time, and in the suburb where we lived there were hardly any Asian kids either, so when I went to primary school I was the only Indian girl. Same for intermediate, and I felt really ostracised. And I don't know, my overwhelming, the one word that comes up whenever I think about my childhood is just loneliness.
High school the same?
High school was a bit better because it was bigger and there was a little bit more of a variety. But I always remember one night, I think I must have been in 3rd or 4th form, and my dad sat me down and, I don't even remember how the issue came up, and he said to me, look, you can do whatever you like, you can dress like them, you can talk like them, you can behave in every way like them, but you'll never be one of them. And I, what teenagers are like, you think you know everything. I'm like, yeah, what does he know? He's never grown up here, he doesn't understand. But I think what he was trying to say is that, you can't go away from who you are. You can't. It will never leave you, and people will always identify you with that. I mean, I am brown-skinned. I am different. It's not going to go away however hard I try to make it go away. And I think it was at university when I started to become comfortable with who I was. There was a group of us girls. I had a lot of Indian friends at university, and we always felt that we were really expected to fit in this little box of what Indian girls were supposed to be, and the tactic that we ended up using to deal with that is just to chop people off, sometimes swearing or just saying something that was absolutely shocking, just to say to people, look, you don't know me, you don't know who I am, don't make assumptions, get to know me first. And also, it just was a hell of a lot of fun. I just seen the looks on people's faces like, oh my God. This,
Where did she come from?
Yeah, this Indian girl, and that's... No, it was really fun.
I find myself sitting here and I'm looking at this Indian face behind a purple and white scarf and this Kiwi accent coming out at me.
Yeah.
Tell me about the scarf, wearing the scarf, because that's probably the first thing that the stereotypical eyes are going to see. And
yeah.
Why?
Well, it's interesting because I have only started wearing a scarf recently. Most of my life I didn't wear a scarf, and I did believe in it, but it was still that residue from my childhood of being too afraid to stand out, of needing to fit in and blend into the background. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I finally reached the stage where I felt confident enough and secure enough in myself. And I'm also the sort of person that hates to be pushed, so whenever I felt any pressure from anyone around me, say from my family or anyone, to say, well, you should be wearing a scarf, I'll be like, yeah, right, I'll do it when I feel like it. I got to a day where I actually articulated that if I ever wear a headscarf, it'll be for God and not for any person here on earth, and unless I do it for that reason, there's no point, so don't push me. And as soon as I said that, it was like all the barriers fell away. It was like, okay, now everybody knows I'm doing it for me, and I've not regretted it for a moment. For me, wearing a headscarf is primarily an act of worship, but it's also a political statement. It's a statement of identity, of being proud of who I am and letting people know who I am. It's a statement of rejecting the need that is not just Western, it's Eastern, it's universal, the need that women have to fit into particular stereotypes so that they can be pleasing. And I think that is increasingly so in New Zealand society, where I feel that so much of young girls, their self-worth is tied to their sexuality and their sexual appearance and not to their inner self, which I think is sad. And for me, it's saying, look, it doesn't matter. And I always think, you know, I could be dressed in the latest fashion with all the jewellery and the makeup, and if I'm rude to you, are you going to care? All that time and money I spent on myself would be worth nothing because you're just not like me anyway.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because for a lot of outsiders, the presumption would have been that the scarf is actually a sign of oppression or of control somehow.
It has been used in that way, and I wouldn't make any bones about that. I absolutely oppose the use of force when it comes to hijab. It should be a woman's personal choice. It is to do with her relationship to God. And if you haven't made that willful choice, then you haven't fulfilled that act of worship. If you're doing it by force, it's worthless.
What about burqa?
The majority opinion will say that there's no requirement to cover your face, and I certainly don't believe that it is a requirement. However, I've talked to a lot of women that have worn the burqa, and I've had massive arguments with them, debates and so on, but I've never been able to shift them from their conviction, neither have they been able to shift me from my position. So the way I feel is that's something that they believe in deeply. It's a deeply held belief. They do it for their reasons, and again, if it's a matter of choice, if that's what they're choosing to do because they believe that that's what they should be doing, then I have to respect that choice.
Have you experienced prejudice because you are so visibly a Muslim?
I think I'm quite lucky in that I haven't had anything too terrible happen to me. The most I get is people yelling out things to me, and I have to admit that I react very badly to that. But I know that other Muslim women do face a lot of harassment. Just going shopping can sometimes be a really negative experience. But on the other hand, there is a whole group of the community that look at me and want to know me. You know, people will smile at me and say hello. People want to know what we're about, who we are, why we do the things we do. And I know that if I hadn't been Muslim, I wouldn't have had those invitations and those
So
really
it's provided an
wonderful
opportunity for you in a lot of ways. Yeah.
It has. It's opened up a lot of doors. So, I mean, on balance, I really would have to say in my life the positives have been more than the negatives.
One of the things a number of New Zealanders might think is that the Islamic community is a closed community. You're only associating with your own kind.
There are hundreds of
Well, I think that is true to some extent.
get access to clean drinking water.
And it's not unreasonable because there's a lot of fear on both sides. You have a host community who sees people that are absolutely different to what they know, and they're afraid because they don't know them, they don't understand them, they're afraid of what they might bring, what changes that might, they're afraid that they might have to change their behaviour. For the migrant community, they're afraid. They may have come here for various reasons as refugees. They're also afraid of losing their children, for example, to drugs, to alcohol, to all sorts of things, teen pregnancies. So you have this fear on both sides that is keeping people apart.
You go back to India, how does that feel?
I try and fit in with the culture there as much as I can, but a lot of times it seems alien to me. I know my parents did their best, to make sure that I knew about the culture, but there's not much you can do about that physical distance. And so while I'm there, it's never home for me. Home is always New Zealand, and I love coming back to New Zealand and just coming into Auckland, and then we drive back to Hamilton and those rolling green hills of the Waikato. It's just soothing to the spirit. When I think of Indian culture, there's some parts of it I like, some parts I don't like, but if someone says to me that you have to do things in this way because it's Indian culture, I'll say, well, no, I don't. I'm not Indian, I don't have to. I will if I agree with it. For me, religion is really the defining factor.
Anjum, what's your relationship with the mosque? I mean, it's kind of kind of architectural symbol of Islam in New Zealand. What's your relationship with the mosque?
Myself, I don't go to the mosque a lot. It's not required, particularly of women, to go to the mosque, but the mosque is a place of congregation mostly and a place of community. And actually in the Prophet's time, the mosque was the centre of politics, it was the centre of business, all the trade delegations, all sorts of delegations would come there. They would have races in the mosque, sporting activities. So it
Kind of the cultural heart of the place.
It is the centre of the community, and it isn't actually intended to be just the place of worship, although it just seems over the centuries that it has evolved to be that. So the mosque is a house of God that should be open to everyone.
Bismillah. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل
The central teachings of Islam?
وأشهد أن لا إله
It's hard to put all of Islamic values into simple things. I mean, there's a ritual aspect, so the belief in God, the 5 daily prayers, fasting during the months of Ramadan, charity, and going for Hajj once in your lifetime. But Islam is about values, it's about community, it's about humility.
يسحب المرء في سيره إلى الله والدار الآخرة.
Tell me about prayer. I mean, it seems to me everyone I talk to about prayer means something different.
Yeah. Well, we pray 5 times a day and we have a set form in the prayer and we have set words that we have to say. But, I mean, the essence of prayer is in the heart. All the movements and so on is symbolic of the individual submission to God.
And do you have a sense that those prayers are answered in some way?
Oh, we believe that every prayer is answered, just not in the way that you might want it, because people often want things that are not good for them. So when you pray, we say, we believe that either 3 things happen. Either you get the thing that you wanted, or something else bad that might have been going to happen to you will no longer happen, or if the prayer is not answered here in this world, then you'll get a reward for it in the hereafter, like there will be something for you. Islam means peace, and that's where the peace is that serenity that you get of knowing God's love, of knowing that He would never send you anything bad, and to accept whatever comes.
What does Islam have to offer for people who are suffering, and what's it got to say about death?
Death is just a passage to another state of existence. In terms of suffering, we believe that God is justice, so that anyone that suffers in this world will receive their compensation in the next world, either that or that some of their sins will be forgiven. So that suffering is often seen as a form of mercy. But having said that, to intentionally cause anyone suffering is just forbidden.
One of the great stereotypes of Islam, of course, this century has been as a result of 9/11 and the West's attitude to terrorism that associates with Islamic extremism. How does that affect you as a New Zealand Muslim?
I just felt really scared, and I felt really scared for my kids, and especially because the mosques were attacked. We had this incident in Dunedin where a woman had faeces spread over her house and these things happening, and I just wanted to stay in bed with the covers pulled over me and hide. And I felt scared about sending my girls to school and what they might have to face there. It was really difficult.
A lot of people around there were wanting signs from the Muslim community. Of course, we had some politicians who were offering counter signs that New Zealand Muslims didn't identify with the terrorism.
I mean, it's really difficult because all sorts of people commit all sorts of acts. I mean, and everyone in that group is not held accountable. I guess, in a sense, around Muslims, they try and hold everyone responsible because they believe or they mistakenly think that the religion is pushing people to do these kinds of things. And that's where, that perception is really wrong, because the religion doesn't push them. These people are in an environment where they obviously must feel helpless. There's a lot of violence and tension going around, and people are able to exploit that through religion. I mean, because natural human inclination is to save your life at any cost, and to go against that, you must have gone through something really terrible to reach a stage where you're not only ready to kill yourself but to kill everyone around you, and that's really un-Islamic. I mean, suicide is forbidden in Islam, killing innocent civilians is forbidden. Fighting in Islam is about fighting those who fight against you, and the rules around that are so strict that I find it hard to understand how people have managed to twist verses of the Quran to try and justify what they're doing. Obviously that happens, but the vast majority of Muslims are not behaving in that way.
وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, and you discuss them in a good manner. You don't fight about things, you don't argue about things. You just talk nicely about people, about their creator, who has created the world.
I'm really lucky to have my parents here, so we have religious classes at their house once a week and, have discussions, we'll talk about things.
Because we are Muslims living in a non-Muslim society. If we want others to respect us and our religion and our faith and our culture, then we got to do the same to others. Are you going to do that more often now?
Yeah.
Yes? Be nice? You're nice to people?
Yes.
Sometimes you fight?
No.
No? Oh, okay, that's very good.
The ultimate, place that you can reach as a Muslim is to be totally not thinking about yourself but thinking about other people and what you can do for other people. To serve God means to serve humanity, and so, for example, to go to bed full while your neighbour who's hungry means that you're not a good Muslim. You have a responsibility to your neighbour, whether that person is Muslim or not Muslim.
Does that have an effect on the way you exercise your vocation, your working life as a chartered accountant?
It affects everything. That morality, that integrity is with you all the time. And people are human and you lapse and you make mistakes, but for example, you don't want to be talking about people behind their back and saying nasty things when you know that's going to affect them in some way. You don't want to be cheating on taxes and stuff like that.
Are there aspects of work that you wouldn't engage in because of your religion?
Well, yeah, that's always difficult. See, for example, I would never feel comfortable working in a pub. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near buying or selling and serving alcohol, stuff like that. And so as an accountant, I do accounts for pubs and so on. And I don't feel entirely happy about it, but, the Quran tells us to take the middle path and that the religion should be easy. And I think that God expects us to do what is reasonable. And I think that, it's just in the environment where I work, it would be impossible to say no because it's a small firm, there's a limited number of staff, and so if you do something sincerely and for the right reasons, then I think, that is always going to be acceptable.
We need to select a special box within the MYOB.
Right, is that another tax turn?
Your other workmates and colleagues accept you comfortably there?
Yeah, they've been really good. And as I said, I found that anyone that knows me just accepts me for who I am. I mean, they've had to make little accommodations in the sense that if they're ordering morning tea, they'll make sure there's something vegetarian or something that I can eat, and they always go out of the way to do that. They tease me a lot. I tease them back. I mean, it's a really fun place to work. I really enjoy it. Because I have my own office, they'll respect that I have my door closed and I'm praying. The prayer times are pretty flexible, they're not fixed, so you have a period of about, 2 or 3 hours where you can do it, so that makes things a lot easier. Concentrating in my prayer is one of the hardest aspects of the religion because that's a time when everything is quiet. It's a time when you do all your thinking. You're planning and you want to think about what you're doing next or what you've done today or what somebody said, and it's so hard. I think it's akin to meditation in that sense and trying to clear your mind, and it's a really difficult thing to do. But even if you don't achieve that state, you still just have that time and that connection.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. أما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا.
How do you view the Quran?
The Quran is, for us, divinely revealed text in the same way as the Bible. We would view the Quran in the same light as the Bible, the Torah, the Gospels. We just believe that the Bible that we have today is not the Bible that was revealed to Jesus, that there were some interventions, certainly around the Council of Nicaea and all those sorts of things that meant that the original message was lost. And therefore there was the need for another messenger to bring people back to the worship of the one true God. The Quran for us is the miracle of Muhammad, that it is God's words and it is a prescription for us to lead our lives. It is a guidance. It is an inspiration.
And what does it tell you as to who the prophet is?
Well, the prophet himself was very clear about that, and the Quran is very clear that he's just a human being. Right, and that's why for us we never have any pictures of the prophet. It's just to ensure that there is never a stage where people start worshipping the prophet, because he himself said, I'm just a human being, just like you. I'm just a messenger of God's message.
And what about God? How do we understand God?
Well, the whole tenet of Islam is around unity. Everything stems from the unity of God and the one God. It's about knowing that God is there, protecting and loving me, and knowing that I'm never alone, that he is there with me. And in all the times of my life that I've had real difficulty and I've felt that there's nowhere to turn to, there was always prayer. And I don't know how people live. I just don't understand how people can make sense of the world if they don't believe in God. I know they do, some people do, and they live very successful lives that way, but it just doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think I could have survived my life without that faith and without knowing that God was there to help me.
Is Allah the same God as the Christian God and the Jewish God?
He is. The only difference I would say is the Christian notion of Trinity, which we don't hold with. So we don't see Jesus as the Son of God or God, and this Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost. We don't, one is one, three is not one for us. Right. And that Jesus was a messenger, and we revere him, and we respect him, we honour him, but he was a man. The way that Muhammad was a man, he came to bring the message to the people of the time who had gone astray.
You've been on Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Tell us about what's involved with that, because most of us have no idea, right. And also what it felt like, what it meant to you.
Right. Mecca is it's the place where the Kaaba is, the Haram it's called, and this building was originally built by Abraham. And for us, Abraham is the source for all the Jews, the Christians and Muslims, and it's the first house dedicated to the worship of the one God. And so that's where we face towards prayer. And so for us, it's just a holy place. It's a place that every Muslim looks forward to going to. And as soon as you tell people that you're going for Hajj, Muslim people, they say, oh my God, you're so lucky. They're just like absolute envy, jealousy. They're just excited for you. If they've been on Hajj, they're just, oh, that's wonderful. And I just couldn't stop crying, my first sight of the place. And I just felt unworthy. Because for us, a call to Hajj is an invitation from God. Like, you may want to go, but I've seen so many people that have wanted to go and something has happened and they never got there. Mecca is the size of Hamilton, really.
Right, yeah.
And you're getting like 3 million people descending on a city of the size of Hamilton. It's just like crowds like you wouldn't believe, and everybody feels an affinity to everybody else. You start off going to the tent city of Mina. This is just a big plain, and they put up tents for the 3 or 4 days of the year when the Hajj is on, so everyone's sleeping. So you spend a day at Mina, and then you go about 6 kilometres further away to the plains of Arafat, and that is the main day of Hajj, and you spend from noontime till evening there, and basically all you do is pray. It's just a day of prayer, and we believe that like the gates of heaven are open, that God's mercy is, coming out, and that every prayer at Arafat is accepted. And then at night you go to a place that's about in between Arafat and Mina. It's called Muzdalifah, and there you're supposed to stay the night, and it's just like bare ground. It's pretty hard ground, I mean, I am a really sensitive sleeper. The slightest noise wakes me up. I'm a terrible sleeper, and all we had was like this $3 tarpaulin from the warehouse, like thin as, and I had a travel blanket that had been gifted to me by my local association, and my handbag was my pillow, and that was it. And I slept like a baby. I couldn't believe it, and it felt really neat, just looking up at the stars and feeling really at peace with yourself. It was an amazing experience. And then you go back to Mina and spend 3 days there, and one of the rituals there is when you go to the stone pillars that represent Satan and throw stones at them. But it signifies the rejection of evil, basically, and that is where a lot of the problems at Hajj happen, because it's a confined space and there's 3 million people, and I think that the authorities there do their best, but it's really hard.
Happen again this year. The 7 key pledges, they're going to cover the key areas like health and education.
You've made a conscious decision to move into public and political life. What's helped to fuel that decision?
It was a really difficult decision for me to make, because I was aware of the time commitments involved and the effect that it would have on my kids. For me, I guess the outcome is not so much as important as the journey, and the fact that I've started this journey and have now had access to so many groups of people who would have never heard my voice, who had never heard another side of the story, who had never heard from a Muslim woman. Just to be able to get up and show that we are intelligent, articulate, normal sort of people, and to break down some of those barriers and stereotypes is an end in itself.
What are your hopes for the future?
If I actually try and think about what I'm trying to achieve, I'll get paralysed. I feel absolutely overwhelmed and frightened by the whole situation. I feel a lot of times unworthy. I just think, oh my God. When I'm around, all the people that are MPs or that have been on the list and so on, and I look at the talent and the depth of people there, and I just feel like, oh my God, what am I doing here? So I don't think about it. It's the only way I can cope. All I think about is the next meeting, the next event, the next thing that I want to achieve. Ultimately, I hope to get into Parliament. I think that I'd really like to achieve that. But as I say, even if I don't, I'm just going to enjoy the journey and I'm going to make the most of it.
And what about your hopes for your children?
My hopes are that they can have an environment where they're safe to be who they are and to practice their religion and to do what they want. I don't have any personal dreams for them, because I think that that's not for me to do. They have to live their dreams, and I have to support them in that. I have to guide them if some of their thinking is going astray, but at the end of the day they have to be who they want to be. If that means a suburban housewife with 10 kids, I'll support them with that. That's fine. If they want to be a brain surgeon, well, good, great, whatever. I can help them in that way, but I just want to make sure that I've done my best to create an environment in this country where everybody, not just Muslims, but everybody can be accepted, and that we all learn to appreciate each other, not just tolerate each other, but to appreciate each other.
English brother.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.